Hey, it's Sean, and you are listening to episode 294, which means episode 300 is right around the corner, and we are looking for help to record that episode. To celebrate 300, we're going to go live again and open up a virtual studio for anybody to join in and watch the chaos unfold or even dialogue in the chat feature in real time. Of course, we'll edit and produce it and publish a couple weeks after, but we want you to be a part of the show. So on Sunday, April 12th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, please join us. If you would like to be on screen and address me and Kyle and the audience, we'd love to have you. Come on, maybe share a favorite episode or highlight a story from the show over the years. Be sure to watch for the links. Sunday, April 12th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. Until then, back to the show. Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast.
We believe life is about how we react.
Hey, welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. I'm Sean, and I'm so glad you're here. Kyle, what is on your mind today?
I was riding my trike with my dad in Chico, California, a year and a half ago. And we were coming up to a road, and I was just going to go because I was following him anyway. It turned out there was a car coming. So at the last second, I turned my wheel, and you know what happens when that happens. Like, I flipped over.
Sure.
And I scraped my knee. I got some road rash on my knee. It hurt, but it wasn't the end of the world.
Yeah.
So when I got home, I was in the shower. I washed it off and gave it a pretty good scrub. Well, so it healed up pretty good. But there was one little part of it that was not healing. And so, and it didn't bother me, except for when I sat in the shower, I would hit my knee on the wall. Exactly in that spot. Like, not hit it, but like my knee would touch the wall. And it would be sensitive. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to tell this to my doctor. So I had my annual visit, and not with Dr. Lynch, but with my general practitioner.
Yeah.
So I'm like, hey, there's this spot on my knee it won't, like, a tiny, tiny spot that's not healing up. And he's like, oh, he, like, looks at it and, like, feels it a little bit. He's like, it looks like there's something in there.
Oh, wow.
So I scheduled another appointment, and he made a little incision and pulled it out with tweezers. It took an hour and a half to get to it, but he did a good job, made a tiny incision, pulled out a little rock. Oh. It was a piece of the road from Chico, California. It had been in there for a year and a half.
That's crazy. So you just got it removed recently?
Yeah, like this week. Yeah.
Wow. How's it healing now?
Hey, it's fine. Just he put one stitch in it. I would argue that I mightn't have even needed that stitch. But the rock he gave to me in a little cup, and it's way bigger than I had envisioned it. I had a feeling that he was going to get in there and be like, oh, there's nothing here. But no, in fact, there was a decent-sized little pebble in there.
Piece of gravel. That's nuts. Well, I'm glad you said something to your doctor, because, I mean, I feel like most of us would just put up with that tiny little nuisance for the rest of our lives, right?
Yeah, well, and he said, he's like, you don't have to take it out. Like, it's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm like, let's just see what's in there. Let's go on a little treasure hunt.
Why not? Why not? That's insane. I wonder how much of that kind of story is true for everybody. You know,
Yeah.
whether it's an embedded rock or I don't know, a muscle tear or something that you just
Mhm.
don't give it the attention it needs
Right.
and,
Yeah.
prolongs, and turns out into something kind of annoying.
Yeah.
I always hear those commercials on TV or the radio. It's like, "Oh, I put up with back pain for decades thinking it was just the way it was,
Mhm.
and then I got these
That's it.
fancy
Yeah.
soles for my shoes and everything is fine."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah. Uh,
"If everything was that easy, how cool."
it's kinda like when someone says, "If you just drink some green tea, your FA will go away."
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
pray it away.
right? And there's probably some of that might be
Yeah.
valuable,
Yeah.
but I don't know about much of it.
Yeah.
Kyle, what's on my mind today and what I wanna spend a little bit of time on with this episode is this idea of finding your people and making sure you don't lose yourself in the process, right? We
Mm.
talk so much about community and connecting with others who understand you and all these things. And I've had a couple of conversations this week that just put a different perspective on it, or
Mhm.
perhaps reminded me that everybody is at a different stage of life
Yeah.
at different points in time. Um, and I remember, I think back to your origin stories and mine when it comes to FA. When I was diagnosed, I reached out and found you pretty quick. And
Mhm.
then I always hear you talk about how when you were diagnosed, you kind of ignored it for 8 or 9 or 10 years or something.
Yeah.
So obviously everybody's different. Everybody's gonna find their groove at different points in life, and I thought it might be fun to talk about some of the principles that you and I have leaned on, and how that might be encouraging for others who are either looking for community or are looking to be okay
Mhm.
with who they are and without a big community. Either way, I think is fine.
Yeah. And I think probably one of the main I mean, we'll see when we get to the end of the conversation, but right now, I'm thinking one of the main points is there's no wrong way to do it.
Yeah,
It's whatever works for you, whatever is gonna get you to the next day sometimes,
sure.
to get through this. And whether it's, joy in finding community or, like you said, joy in just being okay with who you are,
Yeah.
I think that's good.
I'm gonna start with the first question, throwing it to you. Can you think about um when connection with others, whether it be one person or 100, when did it
Right.
actually change something for you?
Yeah, that's a good call. Because we talk about connection and what is that, right? What is connection and how do you create it? To me, something that comes into mind is a little bit of a bigger scale. Like when my family and I were wrestling with my diagnosis and trying to figure out what to do, we decided we wanted to do this bike ride and we put it out to our community. And that's always a little bit of a scary thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm opening myself up. I'm broadcasting it to the world that I have this disease and now I have to deal with it. I have to look in the face. But, it changed things for me when our community was like, all right, we're going to put together a golf tournament and raise money for your bike ride across the country because we believe in you and we care about you and we want you to be okay and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, that turned the fear of opening myself up to, oh my gosh, this is really like people appreciate what we're doing and would like to understand the burden that we're facing and be a help to overcome it.
Yeah.
And it kind of changed the conversation from fear to like, oh wow, people do want to help.
Can you talk about, and I know you've shared in the past, but maybe for the sake of this episode, you were diagnosed at the age of 17, 16?
Yeah, 17.
So, and then you didn't really do anything until you were 20 something?
I didn't do anything for like almost 10 years. Yeah.
Can you talk about why?
Yeah, I can try. Partly I was graduating high school and going to college during that time, and I was probably pissed
Mm.
that there was something threatening to take that experience away from me.
Mm.
You know, that I wasn't going to be able to have the experience that was in my mind because of this disease. It was different
Sure.
than I had imagined, but it was incredible. But that's probably one of the reasons I wanted to keep it arm's length, and that probably didn't have to do with college only. It probably had to do with lots of aspects of my
Sure.
life. You know, whatever, dating and finding a job and just all the things that were in my head. FA was going to affect those, and I wanted to keep that away as long as possible, I think.
Sure. Yep, that makes sense. And the reasons, it could be any reason, right? It's like you said, there's nothing wrong about it. But just curious. Because I think about, if I take that same question for myself, I was diagnosed at the age of 25 and sure, wrestled with a lot of different emotions in a very short period of time. But almost right away, I got it online and found some stories about you. We lived in the same town at the time. And I, for lack of better words, I jumped right in, right? I'm like, hey, you,
Yeah.
let's wait, what? Who? Tell me more. And then
Right.
we met for a beer and pizza or something within a couple weeks. So I wonder, it's not all age, but I can't help but think age has something to do with it, right? Had I
Yeah,
been
for sure.
diagnosed at 10 or 15 years of age, would I have had a different approach? And I
Big
would
time.
say probably yes, I don't know. But at 25, I've already had some of those experiences that you talked about. Of course, at 25, there's other things that I'm worried about, but I don't know. I wonder how much, um, not just age, but I do wonder how much that plays into it.
Do you think maybe you saw it a little more objectively, like some aspects of it were like, this is an issue to be solved? You know, I had myself wrapped up in the emotion thinking
Sure.
about, changing the future. And I don't know, is there an aspect to it where we're like, all right, how do we get through this?
Yeah, I would bet a little bit of that. But also, I think a big part of it, when I was diagnosed, what pushed me to go to the doctor were not silly, but maybe minuscule symptoms. I was walking fine. I would bump into walls or people here and there, but there was nothing major that was like, oh my gosh, something's wrong. Fatigue was my biggest frustration.
Yeah.
Perhaps there was an element of what I was being told FA was and is and what they would do to me. I didn't see it. I didn't
Yeah.
rationalize that it could be, not that I denied it and thought, no, this is wrong. It was more of a, okay, that might be an issue. in the future. Like, it doesn't bother me right now. I'm just tired a lot, so it's fine. I'll work around
Yeah.
it. So I do believe there's some of it. At 25, I've already seen some maybe struggles in life, whether it be myself or friends or family, and it's like life goes on. But then also, it didn't make sense to what I was experiencing in that season of my life. So there was also an element of, okay, I'll deal with it later when it becomes an issue or a bigger issue.
Yeah. Do you think you understood it very well? Like, could you see 10 years down the road when you reached out to me? Or was it like, did you not quite understand exactly, the full gravity?
Yeah, I probably have to say I didn't quite grasp it. But again, the doctor told me things to be aware of, and I didn't
Mhm.
deny that. I never thought the doctor is a fool or a liar. It just didn't. I don't know. It was in the back of my head, like, okay, when I buy a house, it'll be one story. Those kind of things went through my
Right,
head
right.
as probably a reality. But there was still, to your point, a lot of things I didn't really fully grasp or understand. And most certainly, I didn't know the progression, what the speed would be
Mhm.
like.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
something that was always up in the air. In fact, it still is. Like,
right,
it would happen someday. Like, is it all going to happen overnight?
right.
Or is it going to be a little here and there? Like, that was something
Yeah,
that went through my head. But, I was like, well, let's live life while I'm still able to, right?
yeah, yeah.
Or everybody's able, but I mean, live it to the degree
Mm,
that I
right,
was able to do so.
right.
If I talk about those beginning stages, I jumped all the way in, and then I've spent the last, what is it, almost 20 years connecting and making friends all over the place. And more recently, what stuck out to me was how powerful the cruise was that we've been on last month.
Mm,
The Barrett
yeah,
Sea cruise was designed to bring people together that understood each other without having
right.
to explain it. So there's that level of community where it's just powerful, but also just as powerful of connecting with one person to better understand what you're up against. Because what I appreciated about meeting you at first is that you had been living it for 10 years, knowingly living
Yeah,
it. So you could tell me what your experience was like, even though it may not be the same as mine. It still gave me insight into what I might be up against, and that's helpful.
yeah, and, I'm thinking about all the people you've met. I feel like each experience that we add to the group of people that we met gives us a more full picture of what FA is. I mean,
Sure.
it's kind of like AI. The more information you feed it, the
Yeah.
more complete the picture becomes.
For sure. So I want to talk for a little bit. We're not at all suggesting everybody needs to make connections and have a tribe. Well, actually, let me change that. I would argue everybody needs a tribe. Everybody needs a community. However, I'm not convinced, Kyle, that community or that tribe needs to be made up of people that are in the same boat as you.
Mm,
And whether it's disease or your political views or your religious beliefs or your financial status, I think what makes a tribe or a community really unique and powerful is that eh, maybe everybody in it is a little bit different.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. Uh, you know, my community is made up of lots of my friends from when I was little
Yeah.
and lots of my friends that have FA. And everything in between. You
Yeah.
know, a friend that I have at a bike shop, a friend that, makes bikes,
Mm,
uh, you know, all kinds of different people. And, I guess you don't have to define yourself by this group or that group, right?
mm,
Like, it's up to you. You can be a part of all of it if you want.
yeah. So before we get into why some people may or may not go one way or another, I wanted to highlight maybe some of the benefits of having that tribe or having that community, whatever it might look like. And one thing I said, meeting you, it helped give me some perspective on what was ahead of me. So in a sense, it was a bit of an educational connection, right? Um, you and I are completely different personalities, and over the years, we've come to realize we're very different. But meeting that first time, being able to pick your brain, I remember asking you specifically. You had ordered at that time. I wasn't much of an alcohol drinker, and you ordered a beer, and I just remember asking, "Wait, won't that make it worse? Like, you can drink. It's okay to drink." And you were like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, like why not? Of course, it'll make it worse, temporarily." But it wasn't like it was gonna have a negative impact forever.
Right.
And that was an educational moment that maybe I wouldn't have found on Google.
Yeah, 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 that's true. And how many of those moments do you think you've had because you've connected with
Oh,
multiple
for
people,
sure.
right?
Yep.
And I always think to myself, I mean, I've said it 100 times, but, just from being around the community, the FA community, other people that have FA, you can observe s- everything that people do,
Mm,
and you can take the things and implement them in your lives, the things that you think will work,
yeah,
and you can completely disregard all the things that you think aren't going to work for you
yeah,
or better your life.
true.
And I think that's one of the true powers of community is learning all those things and
Yeah.
understanding how they fit for us.
I wonder what you would say about emotional relief. You talk about having that golf tournament and being fearful, but then also realizing your friends, your circle, they have your back and they're interested in you and what you want to do. I think that's pretty cool. And for me, I see it a lot in my life too. I feel like when people do things like that, I'm not alone in the journey.
Totally.
They may not understand it fully. My friends still do things that I'm like, really? How long have you been friends with me? Shoot, family can do it. And I'm like, did
Yeah.
you forget I have this thing? But you also realize I'm not alone in that they're doing their best to adjust and meet me at a place where it makes sense or it's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing the biggest thing when you're first diagnosed is that you feel completely alone and isolated.
Yeah.
And when you realize people are reaching out and trying to make connections, even if there is a false start or two, uh, just seeing that effort, I think, is a big emotional relief, as you say.
Another element I would add is the friendship aspect without having to explain
Oh
much.
my gosh.
There's an automatic connection. Well, we talk about it even this season. You see another person in a wheelchair. You don't know why they're in the wheelchair, but you feel like you're best friends. There's a
Yeah,
connection and an
yeah.
understanding no matter what they're up against. And sure, you might hit it off, you might be best friends forever, or you might just have a nice short conversation that you never revisit. And either way is fine. But I feel like we tend to pull things from every interaction, no matter how big or small or short or long term it might be.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, I think you and I, and we can probably relate this to a lot of our friends, but we could go hours without even thinking about FA. I feel like, because we're talking about other things, hopes and dreams and aspirations and whatever, beer. I don't know, stuff
Yeah.
and just everything else. But I feel like I don't go that long in my general life or with friends that don't have FA, because there's no denying that it's always there. It's always between us. And I guess I think I probably do have friends where it's way less present, but it's always there,
Yeah.
So
So let's pivot the conversation and talk more about why some people might stay away from or steer clear of people that are in the same boat physically or, medically. Again, tribe and community doesn't always have to be the same diagnoses, but for those that maybe do choose to engage with other people in their disease state, cool, there's probably some benefits to it and maybe some downfalls too. But why do you suppose, like for you, I already asked, but it took you almost 10 years. What are some other things that might hold people back from even thinking about making a new friend or connecting with somebody that might also have the same condition?
I think a lot of it, for me at least, was identity. I identified myself as an athlete, as, a top performer or whatever, and FA was going to limit that. And so that was a hard thing. So it made more sense for me to push it away than to try to incorporate it at that point in my life.
One that comes to mind for me, I would define myself as a realist. I'm not skeptical, but I also understand, or at least I feel like I have a decent grasp on what's real. So I've never...
Some might argue.
Yeah, it's fine. And I've never... Again, I've never really struggled with denying it's not there or it's not going to impact me. But I have gone through times where I'm like, you know what? That's fine. When that day comes, I'll cross that bridge when I need to. But I don't necessarily need to consume myself with what that might look like right now and how that might impact my life right now. So it's not that I didn't want to see what's coming. It's that I didn't want to deal with it right now. I was okay with the wheelchair, but I'm not anywhere near there. So I'll worry about that later. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think there's a balance there that's really hard to strike, because it's about optimizing the moment, but really living in the moment and making everything that you can of today.
Yeah.
But then at some point, there is a time where it's like, oh no, I need a wheelchair yesterday.
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it because I was putting it off. And so there's that balance, right, of living for today, but also being real about what is going to be needed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Sean, there's a really scary thing, like when you meet somebody who might be more progressed than you, especially with FA or other diseases for sure. Maybe you go to a conference or a meeting with other people, and I mean, it runs the spectrum from people who were just diagnosed to somebody who was diagnosed 25 years ago. And that can be hard to sort of see the future and understand that may or may not be me someday. And I think that's a really hard thing, and I think it's a really valid reason to keep it at arm's length. I think you're allowed to do what you need to do to protect yourself. And if that means not going to that meeting or conference, I think that's fine. And maybe consider going the following year after you've had a chance to meet a few people outside of that setting, or, and not go all the way all at once.
Yeah. Avoiding community isn't weakness. It's maybe self-protection, right? So, and maybe community is the wrong word, but avoiding certain aspects of community is more about preservation.
Mm-hmm. I remember being at a National Ataxia Foundation meeting in 2004 in San Diego. It might have been 03, but anyway, San Diego, and there was a Birds of a Feather meeting, and all the people in that meeting have the FA.
Mm.
And I was so nervous. My heart was pounding out of my chest. And people were just hanging out like they had seen each other before at previous conferences, and they were just hanging out. Now, I was so focused on solving the problem. Like, I wanted everyone's tips and tricks and, what vitamins do you take and what's your exercise routine, all this stuff. And everyone else was like, dude, chill out.
Yeah,
like, they
calm
didn't
down.
say that. But like, we're just here to hang out, man. Like, so I think it's a really nerve-wracking thing to, to meet other people, especially if they've been in the community longer.
Yeah, I imagine everybody's going to deal with it a little bit differently, but maybe some people are avoiding those types of meetings or connections because of comparison. Whether it's where I'm at versus where you're at because I don't want to be where you're at, or perhaps, I deal with this sometimes where like survivor's guilt. I'm almost 45 and I can still walk. Like, that is not super common in FA. So there's a part of me, well, I mean, I can walk with a walking like there's some ability, but a lot of people with FA can't use their legs like maybe I still can here and there. And there's a part of me that's like, that's not fair. Like, why is it okay for me but not them? So there's that element. Like, thankfully, I think I've done well not to let that keep me back from meeting people and being myself. But there is in the back of my head, like, man, why do they deserve, or why did they get what they got and I got what I got? Like, why is that different?
I was talking with my therapist years ago specifically about this exact thing, and I was telling him about survivor's guilt, and I'm 44, but some kids with FA are more progressed than me, and they're only 11.
Yeah.
And he said to me, do you think that kid would want you to feel bad about your situation, or do you think that kid would want you to do as much as you can for the community? Or maybe those aren't the exact words, but he pointed to the perspective of that kid, and obviously I'm not talking to that person, but I can imagine that they would want the best for me, just like I feel bad about this situation they're in. And so anyway, that was one of the things that really changed my perspective on that kind of, I mean, it didn't go away. There's still that feeling and that thought, but it changes the perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I think everybody is going to wrestle with something at some point a little bit differently. And I wonder, or I would guess that wrestling is more of a form of self-preservation, protecting who I am or who I thought I would be, and trying to navigate through that as it unfolds or as you figure it out. When I meet people that maybe haven't met anybody with FA, or they haven't really been connected to any event or outreach or conference, I don't see it as, oh, why not? I don't see it as a level of weakness, but more of a, okay, they're not there yet.
Yeah.
I would like to know where they're at, and let me encourage and support however I can. Whether
Yeah.
that's, hey, do you want to ride to the next conference? I'm going, ride with me. Or, hey, here's my number, call or text whenever you've got something on your mind, or you just want to grab a coffee. Like, I'm down to hang.
Yeah.
Any level of involvement is perfect for that person, for that season that they are in.
Totally. I think you make a really good point, because it's so easy to hear like, oh, community's the best, community's awesome, and then feel bad when it doesn't work for you at that moment.
Sure.
And I think partly what you're saying is no one needs to feel bad about not wanting to get involved.
Yeah.
You got to do it when you're ready.
Yep. There's no one way to live this life, right? You do what works for you. So as we wrap this up, Kyle, I think it's worth calling out some of the main points of the message, because it is a bit, we're playing on both sides of the fence here, right? If you will. Like,
Right.
there's no definitive do X, Y, and Z and you're gonna win or whatever. But I do think it's important to encourage people, no matter what you're up against, it's okay to do it the way you want to do it. And
Yeah.
that might mean I don't want any friends with FA.
Mm.
That might mean I want all the friends with FA. Either way is
Right.
fine.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, you're in control. Like, I think that's one of the hard things about rare disease, and obviously in this case, specifically FA, is that it takes control away. You feel like you're not in control of your health or anything. But in this case, like, you get to choose whether you want to be friends with somebody or get involved in the community or not. It's in your control.
Yeah. There are a couple things written down that I want to read, because I do think they're pretty powerful. You can observe before participating. You can pick one or two people, or you can pick a whole group. Either way is fine. You can pick 0. Like, it's okay if you want to avoid people with your condition or disability. You can engage when you need it and turn it off, and avoid it when you don't. Like, that's fine too. You can be more than your condition and still connect over it. And that's something that resonates with me, because, Kyle, when I die, the first line on whatever the eulogy is, I don't want it to be Sean had Friedreich's ataxia. I want it to be 100 other things, and then he also had this. So that's important to me, to be a whole lot more than just my disease.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good example, because you can certainly have that, but clearly you connect with other people with FA and find great value in that as well. So you can have both things. It's not one or the other.
Yeah. So ultimately, I think I'll close with this, Kyle. It's your choice. Like you said, you're in control. Wherever you're at, mentally, physically, emotionally, any of it, that's all that matters. Where you're at, how you're navigating it, how you're progressing. Nobody else is responsible for how you choose to move forward. And forward movement looks different for everybody. So be comfortable in your own skin and with your own approach, because it'll all work out the way it's supposed to at some point.
Yep. Trust the process. I love it.
Most of our listeners know we end every episode with a note of gratitude. We both believe in the power of leaning on gratitude to remain grounded in how we perceive life. So, who is your thank you note going to in this episode?
Well, this episode, we're talking about connections, and I was thinking about my friend Ryan. She works at Trader Joe's right across the street, basically, from where I live, and she has a child with a rare disease. And so I forget how, but I think we connected over uplifting athletes because she was connected to them and I was too. And I think I just said, like, hey, I'm going to uplifting. She was checking me out at Trader Joe's. And
what do you mean checking you out?
Good point. She was the checker, like checking
scanning
my
all
items,
your
adding them up, and
okay.
I mentioned uplifting athletes, and her eyes lit up, and that's when we started talking. And anyway, I hadn't seen her in a while. And I just did last week, and we had a great conversation. So anyway, it was just, an uplifting event to see her, and I can't wait till the next time I see her in the store.
Nice. Well, my thing, is in the same vein of making connection and community. So I'm saying thank you to all the friends and families that made Rare at Sea what it was. Our first cruise last month or in February was over 80 people. I don't know how many families, maybe 18 or 19 different families. But it was a phenomenal experience, not only to be able to vacation and relax a little bit, but to be surrounded by people that you may not know their full story. You may not, like, there were some kids and families, I don't know what their conditions were, but I wasn't dying to find out. We were just hanging out, enjoying the sun, enjoying the pool, whatever it was. And I didn't feel any pressure to explain what I'm up against or why I need this, that, or the other. And I just think there was a lot of power in that. And I've gotten some feedback from people that went, testimonials, talking about their experience. And I'm just really grateful that we've been able to put that together and that a lot of the people have trusted the process, as you said, and made it a great thing.
Awesome. I totally agree. I loved that cruise. That was so much fun.
Yeah, for sure.
And thanks to everyone for listening today. You can check out our show notes at twodisableddudes.com. Get links to some stuff that we talked about today. If you like this conversation, you like what you hear, if it brings value to your life, then please share it with a friend, somebody who also might find value with it. Please subscribe. It really helps us out, and it's really encouraging also to see those numbers of all the subscribers. So do that, and until next time, keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to stay connected.
Find us on Facebook and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast player.